It's time for another episode of Chicago Bears Now. My name is Harrison Graham. Ian Cunningham is the Bears assistant GM, going to become the Jaguars GM. We dive into that in just a moment. Plus, we heard from all three Bears coordinators, Declan Doyle, Dennis Allen, and Richard Hightower. Got some reaction to that as well. Let's go ahead and get started with Ian Cunningham. Is he set to become the Jags general manager? This has kind of been rumored for several days now, but when Adam Schefter enters the fray, I think it at least enters that real possibility stage. Here's what he had to say about the Jags GM search. He said, quote, "A name we need to have on our radar is Bears assistant GM Ian Cunningham. He's going to be a candidate for the Jaguars GM job. Some would say he might be the leading candidate. I don't know if he's the leading guy, but he's certainly going to be in the mix." And that is the only name I've heard a national reporter link to the Jags. Doesn't mean there are others. I'm sure they'll interview other candidates, but Ian Cunningham is in the mix, like Adam Schefter said. And there's been a lot of buzz. Like I said, a lot of internet chatter about this before Schefter jumped into the fray. And quite frankly, I hope he gets the job for a multitude of reasons. One, he's got a lot of experience in this league with the Eagles under Howie for a long time, Poles' right-hand man for a few years. He's had GM interviews before. He's been the Titans finalist for a couple years, had a chance to get the Cardinals job a couple years ago. I think he's ready for this opportunity. And look, selfishly, I want to get some draft picks. I think if you told me you were going to get 3 years out of Ian Cunningham with Ryan Poles, I would have taken that. Look, if he's back, if that's the worst-case scenario, that's not a bad thing because we know he's a talented executive. But you get a third-round pick in this year's draft and a third-round pick in next year's draft. And to me, when I look at this 2025 NFL draft, day 2 is the sweet spot. So if you get an extra bullet in the chamber in that third round to maneuver around or stay there and pick or whatever, or maybe that helps you move up or down at some point in the draft, I'm all for that. The more picks you have, especially in the higher rounds, the more kind of variables you have at your disposal to move around, which we know Ryan Poles has been prone to do at times. So I hope that he gets that job for himself personally, because I think he's worthy of it, but also for the Bears' sake. I'd like to get a couple of extra borderline premium draft picks. So what say you? Be honest. Do you want Ian Cunningham to get the Jags job? Type Y for yes if you do. If you're like, no, I want him back working with Ryan Poles, type in for no. I don't think either's a bad case scenario, but I think with Ben Johnson entering the fray, new direction, his involvement in the roster, I think this would be a good time. Plus, Jeff King, I think, is ready to take a step forward and be Poles' number 2 man. Okay, let's dive into these coordinator press conferences. Dennis Allen, Declan Doyle, Richard Hightower, all speaking to the media today. And we'll start with Dennis Allen because he's the veteran. He's the big name here when it comes to these Bears coordinators. And before we get to this first quote, I do want to mention this, and I'm sure Lions fans are going to be pissed off. Dennis Allen was asked directly, hey, what's the connection? When did you get in touch with Ben? Yada, yada. And he said at some point toward the end of the season, Ben reached out and said, hey, would you be interested if I get a head coaching job in being my DC? And he said he would. Obviously, there's connection with Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, all that stuff, because Glenn coached under Allen. Campbell was in New Orleans for a while as well. Lions fans freaking out. See, Ben wasn't focused. He was building a coaching staff. That's kind of how this works. It just is what it is. Here's Dennis Allen on his plans for the Bears defense. Quote, "We want to be an attacking, aggressive style of defense. We want to take the fight to the offense and not let the offense dictate the tempo to us. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to challenge everything. We're going to play the game the right way. We're going to play a tough, physical brand of football." I think the brand of football you've come to expect at the Chicago Bears. And, of course, he's tying in the history there. Like, when I think of the Bears, you think big-time physical defense. Now, obviously, while we want that, we obviously want the offense to do its part for once as well. But when I hear that, a couple of things stand out to me. Things I expect from Dennis Allen, watching him over the years and just listening to his words. One, more pass rush production. I don't know if that means more blitzing. We've talked about his blitz rate recently. He's been as low as 18%, which is toward the bottom of the league. He's been as high as 33%, which was top third of the league. Usually he's somewhere in the 20s, which is kind of league average. So I don't think you're going to get a Brian Flores level of blitzing. But I think the attacking type of defense you're going to see and the aggressiveness is more man coverage. Jalen Johnson, which that's what he's better at, quite frankly. He can get back to just, he might even start shadowing number one receivers in this type of system, which I'm really excited about. And he specifically shouted out Kyler Gordon. He said Kyler Gordon is an outstanding nickel corner. And when I think of the word attack, aggressive, Kyler Gordon, I mean, remember early last season and in the preseason in particular, he was just lighting people up. They would blitz him, and then for several weeks, they just wouldn't do that anymore, just dropping him into coverage. It's like, when I think of Kyler Gordon, it's like, hey, bring this guy in the box. He will hit people hard. You can bring him on cat blitzes. Obviously, he can cover. Get the full arsenal out of this kid because he's a very, very good player and a very, very capable player. I would not be shocked at all if he was someone who got a contract extension this offseason, as he is now eligible for that. And it seems that Dennis Allen identifies him as a player that he can get pretty creative with, which has me excited. So obviously I'm not going to hit every single thing all three of these guys said, but those two stood out to me, talking about when Ben Johnson reached out to him and his willingness to come to the staff and his aggressive and attack mindset of how he wants to run this defense. I think those are both very, very exciting things. All right, before we get to Declan Doyle, let's tell you guys about our sponsor, PrizePicks. Shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's show, as they are the number one daily fantasy sports app in North America. 10 million users and counting, available in more than 30 states. If they are available in yours, you should go check them out. The way PrizePicks works is simple. You can pick new lineups, multiple every day, however many you want, as long as you have money in your account. 2 or more players, and then you pick more or less based on the stat projections available. If you're doing football players, touchdowns, fantasy score, receiving yards, passing yards, whatever the case may be, basketball, points, rebounds, blocks, assists, steals, soccer, goals, saves, all that type of stuff. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS to get started today. And you got a little freebie for the big game. Patrick Mahomes, half a passing yard. If you can do lineups as few as 2 players, you're halfway home with this one. Pair that with something else, you can win some money. And with certain lineups right now, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. Yes, $10 can turn into 10,000. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. That code CLNS will get you a $50 bonus when you sign up and play for just $5. Once you play a $5 lineup, doesn't matter if you win or lose, you are going to get a $50 bonus into your account immediately. Okay, Declan Doyle. Obviously, I would say out of all the hires, although weirdly enough, some with Press Taylor, just not a relevant enough position on the staff as pass game coordinator to freak out about, in my opinion. But this has been the one that's caught people's attention, right? 28 years old, was a student coach at Iowa 6 years ago. Like, he's young. And he came off as young today. No surprise. He's 3 years younger than me. I thought he was nervous at first. And then he settled in after 4 or 5 minutes. Look, it's something he's going to have to get used to. He's the offensive coordinator. You talk to the media every week during the season. So that's just how that goes. It was also on Zoom, so that's kind of a bizarre first setting. Maybe it would have been better if it wasn't. Who knows? But I thought, like, once he started talking about football, X's and O's, philosophies, even if there was still a slight nervous energy, you're like, okay, this guy knows football. He's kind of a football nerd, and that's kind of what we've learned, right, over the last few days and since he's been hired is, okay, why would you bring this 28-year-old? Well, he's an energetic kind of football nerd. That's the best way I could describe him based on what we know so far. And he was asked, hey, what do you expect your job to look like? And he said this: my job is going to be to organize and detail the game plan, especially early in the week, he mentioned. Do the work that Ben Johnson won't have time to do now that he's the coach. And there's more detail and nuance in there, but he's basically saying Ben Johnson as a play caller, when he wasn't the head coach, he had all the time in the world to just focus on that, watch opposing team film, get into all the X's and O's of game plan. While he's still going to be able to do some of that, he needs someone he can trust and to put in the hours and to be organized. That's what my job is. That is basically what he is saying here. I also like this. He echoed Johnson's sentiments that we heard at his press conference in terms of designing and building this offense around Caleb Williams and the Bears' current offensive personnel. He even used an example with Bo Nix. He was like, look, we installed things with Bo due to his mobility that we had never run before. And he said we because he had been with Sean Payton. He knows his offensive principles, and that's something he's grown with the last 5 or 6 years because he's been with Payton for 5 or 6 years. And he even pointed out they hit a touchdown against the Chiefs on a new install that had never been in their offense before. So I like that he had tangible examples and hand-on experience of like, hey, we adapted our offense to what Bo Nix could do, and we're going to do the same thing with Caleb Williams with what he can do. So I really like that quite a bit. I don't need Declan Doyle to light up the press conference every week. I think that's more important for the head coach. Doesn't have to be amazing for Ben Johnson either. Just be passable. And again, I thought as it went on, it was fine. So I'm not going to freak out over it. Again, when you hear him talk football, it's like, okay, this guy knows football. He's a hungry kid, and he's going to grow into this role under Johnson, and Ben's going to take him under his wing. And look, multiple people have reported that they believe this guy has head coach in his future. So we'll see what that looks like down the road. He also was asked about what he thinks about Caleb Williams, and he was like, yeah, obviously I haven't been able to dive into his rookie film too much yet, but based on what he's seen and obviously what he watched in college, he said the arm talent is crazy. I mean, it's very impressive. He's a very impressive player, but his second act, the ability to evade the pocket, his ability to create is a special thing. And again, kind of pointing out like, yeah, this is something he's really good at. We are not going to eliminate that from his game. We're going to lean into that while obviously helping him evolve as a pocket passer as well. Do you feel better or worse about the Declan Doyle hire after today? If you watch the presser, if not, I'd say go watch it. B for better, W for worse. I feel about the same. Seems like he's energetic. He's going to have to grow into this role. He's definitely a 28-year-old. Came across as that, but if he fits in the locker room, if players respect him, and if Ben Johnson trusts him, it's really all that matters at the end of the day. So I would say I feel roughly about the same as I did before the presser. Okay, Richard Hightower, he, of course, is retained as the special teams coordinator. I like the move. 5th in DVOA last year. They had that bump in the road in the middle of the season with the field goal protection, but that got ironed out. A lot of creativity with the return in Week 18. Get the game winner there. Obviously, kicker and punter and return game were solid pretty much the entire season other than that bump, like I mentioned, with the field goal team. Here's what I liked about Hightower. I'm not going to get super deep into the special team press conference. His first question he was asked was, hey, we haven't talked to you since the Green Bay game. What were the emotions like after Cairo hit that game winner to send you off into the offseason on a high note? And he basically said, I'm paraphrasing, I appreciate the question, but I'm fired up about 2025 and working with Ben Johnson and getting started here. And I wouldn't have blamed him at all if he was like, man, that was an awesome moment. We had lost 10 games in a row. That was great for Thomas and all that. And I'm sure he feels some of that, but he's like, hey, man, we're full steam ahead. Like, I'm glad we won that game, but last year was unacceptable. Ben Johnson, I cannot wait to work for this guy. He's hungry as a head coach. I'm going to do my part to help him win, is essentially what he said. So I like that mindset. No one was more fired up than me that they beat Green Bay. They hadn't beaten them in over 2,000 days. It's over with, though. You went 5-12. All the coaches got fired, basically, except for Hightower. And now it's on to 2025. And that's how it should be. Because there's only one team standing at the end of the season, and the Bears were not one of them. So I think that's the right attitude to have. And I think that's the right mindset for him to have. Like, hey, I'm happy to be back here. I didn't know if I was going to be back. Ben, he said him and Ben hit it off from the jump and that they were on the same page with a lot of things. So you like that synergy. And I like having someone in a notable role back from last year because he can help Ben understand some of the things that may have gone wrong throughout that season, something to learn from, and obviously hit the reset button here in 2025. So there you have it. My reaction to the 3 pressers and obviously the Ian Cunningham update as he appears to be in the mix to be the Jaguars GM. My name is Harrison Graham. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. We'll continue to pump out content here on Chicago Bears Now.